Let's continue worshiping with the reading of God's Word. If you guys would stand up with me as we read this together. I encourage you to read along or just meditate on this. This is a continuation of our worship here from Micah chapter 6, verses 1 through 8. Let's read together. Listen to what the Lord says. Stand up, plead my case before the mountains. Let the hills hear what you have to say. Hear, you mountains, the Lord's accusation. Listen, you everlasting foundations of the earth. For the Lord has a case against his people. He's lodging a charge against Israel. My people, what have I done to you? How have I burdened you? Answer me. I brought you out of Egypt and redeemed you from the land of slavery. I sent Moses to lead you, also Aaron and Miriam. My people, remember what Balak, king of Moab, plotted, and what Balaam, son of Beor, answered. Remember your journey from Shittim to Gilgal, that you may know the righteous acts of the Lord. With what shall I come before the Lord and bow down before the exalted God? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000 rivers of olive oil? Shall I offer my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. This is the word of the Lord.
Good morning. It is good to be with you, to be able to talk about Micah and the prophecy that he gave to us about 2,700 years ago. Ethan did a really good job of being able to kind of give us the scope of what the prophets are saying and when they're saying it. And in the slide that he put together for us, you'll see that Micah is one of the prophets of Israel. Kind of in the 700s, it would be the 8th century BC is when he gives his prophecy. His prophecy actually from verse 1 in the book of Micah, I left it in the back. I'm going to need my wife probably to go back to my little blue carrying case and get my glasses out of there, please. I'm getting too old now. My eyes are going. I'll just tell you what it says instead of trying to read it. It says that he gives this prophecy during the time of Ahaz and Hezekiah. There's a dual, it's father and son who are ruling co-rulership, and so that's probably in the 730s is when this prophecy is given. The nation, the northern nation of Israel, that are kind of the 10 tribes that have left God and are choosing to do their own thing, are about 8 years away, if we go 730 at the latest date, to a few months away from being sent into captivity, the Assyrians taking them over, and then being lost from time and history. It's really easy, we've talked about this, to look at these prophecies and what's going on between Israel and Judah, and to see kind of those are the bad guys, and we don't have anything wrong with us. So even though during this time of prophecy that's largely focused on Israel, this is actually a prophecy to the southern tribes of Judah. And the southern tribes of Judah hear this primary message from the book of Micah, and this is the primary message. God isn't satisfied. He isn't satisfied. You think you've done everything you need to do. He is not satisfied. It's almost a message that as Christian believers today, if we really hear that I'm not satisfied, you can bring it up here. It's inside an inside holder. And so I will get it. And so if it's there. Or I might have left them. Yeah, if it's not, then it's not. So it must have fallen down into the chairs there. I'm just at the 1. I'm at the 1.1.25, somewhere around there. Let's see. Oh, these are wonderful. All right, we'll get the sermon taken care of this morning. Thank you, boss. If it's not that I'm forgetting water to bring up here, it's glasses. So you'll notice a theme in me. What's happening here is that God has this declaration. You think you're all good. You think you're all taking. I'm not satisfied, and I don't know if you've been around the church enough, or if you've just gotten this from parents or grandparents or maybe a teacher at school. It's this sense of God isn't satisfied. No matter what you do, no matter how much you sacrifice, no matter what you give, no matter how committed you are, God isn't satisfied. You're never enough. Have you ever gotten that message somewhere within the church? Right? And we appropriately don't like that message. We want to say, God is a God of love. He's a great God of love. And whatever we give him, he's happy with. And this message of God not being satisfied is not a biblical message. That should never be passed on to anybody who has anything to do with Christianity. And yet Micah's prophecy says, God ain't satisfied. And so we got to wrestle with why. Why did God choose to reveal this and to say directly the thing that we often don't want to hear and we don't want to pass on to anybody who's part of the church? We can go on to the next slide and see that through the prophets, if you haven't been here over the weeks that we've been talking through the prophets are a revelation of God that hit us from a different angle to show these people 2,000 years ago, God is not who you want him to be and who you think he is. He has some complexity to him. And he purposefully chose. He didn't have to let us know this. This isn't stuff we made up. This is stuff he said, let me show you who I really am. We don't like the fact often that God is a God of revenge. Yet, what do we in our culture beg for? For people who are horrible, for things that are horrible to be set right, for them to be taken care of. And he says, I'll take care of it. But what we learned was that he takes care of it in his time, not in our time. We learned all the way back in Isaiah that he's a God. He's a God who is going to be there for every single person because he is the king of the universe. And he wants to bring everybody back into his fold. He is stubborn. He will not give up on any person, any tribe, any people, any nation. He will see redemption. And what we're going to see in the book of Micah is that he is a very demanding Lord, very demanding boss, very demanding master. And he has a legitimate reason for being demanding. And when Micah unfolds his prophecy, hopefully it will hit you and I the same way that we go, oh, that's why he's not satisfied. Because he has more planned than what I am willing to give in this process. The high point, the point where he brings his kind of sermon to its main point is in chapter 6. And we're going to spend what we read, we're going to walk through chapter 6 and use that as kind of the key point to understand the prophecy of Micah and to be able to see God's character in this process. And so let's go forward in slides here, and we'll turn to chapter 6, and I will read. In chapter 6, verse 1, he says, "Hear now what the Lord is saying. Arise, plead your case before the mountains, and let the hills hear your voice. Listen, you mountains, to the indictment of the Lord, and you enduring foundations of the earth, because the Lord has a case against his people. Even with Israel he will dispute. My people, what have I done to you? How have I wearied you? Answer me. Indeed, I brought you up from the land of Egypt. And I ransomed you from the house of slavery, and I sent before you Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. My people, remember now what Balak, king of Moab, counseled, and what Balaam, son of Beor, answered him. And from Shittim to Gilgal, so that you might know the righteous acts of the Lord. It's strange for us, for him to call the mountains into this kind of court case that Micah presents. But if you know Scripture and you especially love the Old Testament, this should remind you of their first step into the Promised Land. Their first steps into the Promised Land after they conquered Jericho. The nation of Israel marched past Jericho into the middle of horrible people who were possibly going to kill them, and went to Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. And they stood, half of them on Mount Gerizim and half of them on Mount Ebal, and they said to each other, these are the blessings and the curses of the covenant. This is the covenant that God makes with us. This is the covenant we make with him. This is the life we've chosen. Covenants were given in the ancient world between kings and their people. There's no other record in the ancient world of a covenant being given from a God to a group of people. But they were given from rulers, from masters. And those masters would come to a group of people and they would say, I choose you to be mine. Parallel within our world would be a boss of a Fortune 500 company who comes and says, you know what? I want you all to work for me. I want you to be my workers and I will be your boss. I will play my part and you will play your part. If you do all of these things that I'm asking you to do, we are going to see wild, wild success. If you forget this, if you decide that you want to do what you want to do whenever you want to do it, then the whole thing is going to fall apart. But unlike our work environment, I will never fire you. We're in this together. We have a covenant. I am yours. You are mine. Most of us have actually experienced this sort of relationship, and it's up there on the screen. We call this the what of marriage? What do we call this? The covenant of marriage. This isn't a contract. Lots of people treat it as a contract. This is a covenant. The difference between a contract and a covenant. Contract, I do my part, you don't do your part, I don't need to do my part anymore. It's done. Covenant, I do my part, you don't do your part, I still keep doing my part. I committed to this relationship. And this relationship will never go away from my side of the equation. When Micah comes to his key point in Micah chapter 6, and he says, hey, mountains, I want to call you into this court proceeding. It's almost like calling a divorce proceeding and saying, here's my spouse. Here's the one who sat with me thousands of years ago and said, I will give you everything in sickness or in health, in poverty and in wealth, till death do us part. Where have I failed on my part of the agreement? What have I not done? Tell me, God says. I use people like Moses and Miriam, nobodies that ended up leading you out of the most oppressive nation in the world. I set you free from slavery. He would say to us today, I have used people in your life who were nobodies, who I, through my great power, set you free from sin and death. Some of us can go back to our stories and go, I was enslaved. There was no way I could find my way out of the mess that I had made, and God set me free. He did it. I didn't do anything. What kind of love is this? It's covenantal love. He didn't do it so you would love him. He did it because he already loved you. We love because he first loved us. This is what it's all about. When he brings up Balak and Balaam, I don't know if you remember that story. It's with the donkey that starts talking to him and says, hey, what the heck are you doing? You should probably stop this. This is not what God wants. He turns curses into blessings. How many of you can look at your story and see where bosses or spouses or kids or friends have pronounced curses over you and said you're worthless, I don't want you, forget you, and God has turned what seemed like devastation in your life and turned it around and miraculously provided blessing. And you look at your life now and you're like, I would have never been here. I would have never been here except for a God of love. What kind of love is this? He didn't turn the curse into a blessing so you would love him. He did it because he loved you first. Because he already put a ring on your finger and he said, you're mine. And what did you say to him? You're mine. You're mine. My life is yours. All I have is yours. I want nothing else but you with wide-eyed love. Let's do this. When he talks about Shittim and Gilgal, that's the place that the Israelites crossed over the Jordan River in flood. I don't know if you guys have ever been in the desert and seen rainstorms that hit desert regions. They turn into deathly waterways. And God says, I can provide. When there's no way from here to there, when you don't know how you're going to make it through, when it seems like every conversation you have with your child is just a stone wall, I can break those down, and I have broke those down. Every time that you have not understood how you're going to make your house payment or how you're going to do, I have provided over and over and over again, miraculously, abundantly. Tell me, you who are so tired, you who are so worn out, you who have to do so much for me, where I haven't been enough. Those are his words. How do the people respond? In a way none of us ever would respond, right? With what shall I come to the Lord and bow myself before the God on high? Shall I come to him with burnt offerings, with yearling calves? Does the Lord take delight in thousands of rams, in 10,000 rivers of oil? Shall I present my firstborn for my rebellious acts, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? How much does God want from me when he'll finally be satisfied and give me everything I want and everything that I need? How much is he going to require? Do I give him absolutely everything? Caleb, you can go to the next slide. I don't know if any of you guys have ever had a swear jar or anything close to it. But a swear jar is essentially you creating a system that says, I don't like this behavior, and the people around me don't like this behavior, so I'm going to make myself pay for this behavior so that the payment for that behavior tells me, man, this costs. It isn't just something I can pass off and pass away. For many of us, when we hear about the Old Testament system of sacrifice. We think it's God's way that he provided for the people so that they could kind of pay off their debts and that things would be okay, that they could go ahead and buy God a new Mercedes-Benz and say, hey, I love you, Jesus. I show up every single week for church. I serve in the children's ministry. I have sacrificed money so people could go on missions trips when I wasn't sure we were going to be able to put food on our table. I did this. I did that. I have given all this for you. You should be so happy and satisfied with all of my sacrifice. How do you have everything you have? It's all his. The sacrificial system was just a way for God to say, sin hurts. It costs. It's as meaningful as a spouse who has a cheating jar. That every time they look at pornography or any time that they think about somebody else or any time they sleep with somebody else, that they put it into this jar. And then when they get like $20,000, $80,000 inside this jar, they go, you know what? I'm going to buy my spouse a nice new automobile to show them how much I really love them. You completely missed the point. No gift, no matter how big it is to God, ever pays for our rebellion against God. Sin simply costs. That's all it is. Sin simply costs. Costs us and it costs him. And as believers, we get to see in Jesus Christ how much it really cost him, because he became sin so that we might become his righteousness. God says, I'm not satisfied. And if he said it to people of Judah 2,000 years ago, I want to say he's saying it to you and I today, possibly. I'm not satisfied. It's not enough. You've missed the point. Man, that sounds like a condemning, wrong mess. Like everything's, it's all okay. No, it isn't. And let me explain to you why it isn't, he says. And you can go on to the next slide. He has told you, oh man, what is good and what the Lord requires of you, but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. He showed you what he wants from you. To do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. I don't know if you've ever heard this really, really famous verse in Micah chapter 6, verse 8. But when I hear it, my initial movement is I need to do more just things. I need to really ask God for forgiveness so that I can love his mercy and his kindness in my life. And I need to more humbly walk with him. And I have a lot of stuff I need to do. I have a lot of stuff I need to and I must do. And when I hear he isn't satisfied, I say, then I will do more. And this is where I love Hebrew, because that's nothing of what this passage is actually saying. I miss the point, and I think many of us miss the point, and that's why Micah gives us his prophecy and why God says, let me tell you who I really am so you can really, really get it. He says this. He's made it evident what the good and beautiful life is. You already know. When is your faith most vibrant? When is the world most right? It's this. It's when the master is truly the master. When the boss is truly the boss. When the spouse is really the spouse. And I'll use that analogy of spouse because I think that's the one that gets closest to helping us understand what God's telling his people and what he's telling us today. When he started this whole charge against the nation, what did he remind them of? He said, what did we do together? We made a covenant. I did that with Stephen Boss, the most beautiful woman in the room back there. I just got back from going to Italy. I took the most incredible woman I know to Italy because that is her most favorite country in the whole entire world. I took her to the southern Alps because that's where they have the most hot springs and where you can sit in these pools and just lounge all day long. And then we took a train over to Milan, which is the center of fashion. And for 2 straight days, we shopped. And after we shopped for 2 straight days, we got on a plane and we flew down to the Amalfi Coast. And we stayed in this villa that looked out over painted houses on hillsides and ate breakfast out on the balcony every morning and just talked. Why, after 25 years of marriage, did I decide to do that? Because I wanted to act with justice. That's literally what the phrase in Hebrew means. It means to act in a way that corresponds with the desires of the one that you are seeking to be just with. See, in the ancient world, they didn't have written codes that determined their lives. Justice was determined by who the ruler was. And if the ruler really liked this, guess what the just thing to do was? Do whatever the ruler liked. Who's our ruler? Who's your king? Who's the one that made a covenant with you? What does he like? What impassions his heart? One of the things that I saw just this morning, we have a young couple who's going to have a baby. We have another young couple that's going to have a baby. I can't remember in my life when I was more poor, more tired, more overwhelmed than at this stage in my life. Who does God care for? Who's his heart for? Do you think he cares about the Mary and Joseph? Do you think he cares about the Prebes and the Penners? Yeah, he does. And when we have his heart, what naturally flows out of us without even thinking about it? It's not something we do, it's just something we live in. We find ourselves in Italy doing stuff that this guy would go, there's some other stuff I'd be okay with doing. But man, I'm in love with that woman. And man, 25 years of covenant has shown me that heart. And I want to act justly. Does he love the foreigner? No wonder. Yeah, we do. Look at that. They're all excited about this. Yes. Because his people were. What do we have the opportunity to be a part of? I've seen people come from the Sudan and not just show up in a house, but be greeted like you would greet any neighbor. That's what just acting looks like. How do we become people who act justly, who just know what God's heart is, and it just kind of flows out of us? It's in the second part of what he says he's already revealed to them. I've shown you what you need. To act justly, to love. Mercy is how most of us have heard it as we've grown up. Some of us have learned it as he loves kindness. It's actually my favorite Hebrew word. It's the word hesed. And the word hesed is so complex and so full that there is no language in the world that has a direct translation for the word hesed. Do we have the opportunity to be able to show that? I could sit here and try to explain it, but the Bible Project, like many things, does a way better job than I ever could. And so we're just going to watch a little video to be able to see what the word hesed is all about. As they're trying to figure that out, if you look at the translation in Micah 6:8, it says that you need to love mercy. You can see loyal love up there. It says that we're supposed to love loyal love. That's essentially what hesed is all about. It's loving with loyalty. The example that it gives, and are we there, do you think? If not, I'll just try my best to explain it and cover it. If we love with loyalty, we love like Ruth. In the story of Ruth, when all of the family dies and she stays with Naomi, it says that she loves Naomi with hesed. She doesn't just love her in the moment. She just doesn't love her because it's good. She doesn't love her because it's required. She loves her, and because of that love, commitment follows on its heels. I won't just do this once. I'll do it over and over and over for the long term. Just like you do inside of a marriage, right? I wake up a whole lot earlier than my wife does. And one of the things that she's never asked me to do, but I know is just acting justly, and has become a commitment in our lives, is that I make coffee in the morning. And as soon as she rolls out of the bed, she just walks, kind of stumbles would be the better way of describing it, over to the coffee pot, fills that thing up, and just sits inside of her chair. That is hesed. It's not just love at one point. It's a commitment to love because you know that is beneficial to that person. That's what that person needs desperately to function in their life. Jonathan and David, I don't know if you know the rest of the story after Jonathan dies, but they made a covenant with each other. And so David says, find for me any one of the sons of Jonathan. In the ancient world, kingdoms and kings passed on patrilineally. So when somebody new took over rulership, what was the first thing they did? They got rid of every male from the other side of rulership, because if there's no other males from that line, there's no chance they could step up and say, I can run the show. At David's detriment, he could possibly be taken out and overthrown legitimately because he wasn't on the throne before Saul and Jonathan and their line was. He takes in a cripple named Mephibosheth, and he continues to sit him at his table and feed him his food and connect him with all his advisors and all the people with resources. And if you've ever been a part of any organization, the person in charge always does dumb, stupid stuff, and eventually the people who are closest can say, hey, here's somebody else that we could put in that position and get rid of this knucklehead. That's where he sets Mephibosheth. And when Scripture describes what David does, guess what it says? It says David shows Hesed. Psalm 136, over and over and over and over and over and over and over. Most of us know it as loving kindness endures for how long? Forever. It's literally the word Hesed. His Hesed endures forever. God says, this is what I'm not satisfied with. You don't know me well enough to act justly. You just do whatever anybody else tells you to do or whatever you make up in your mind to do. You don't know my heart. And if you do know my heart, you know my heart for a week, you know my heart for a month. I want you to love commitment. I want you to love loyalty. I want you to be just full of doing the same thing week after week, month after month, year after year. I want you to continue to serve these little children. I want you to continue to set up for Sunday mornings and tear down on Sunday mornings. I want you to continue to lead worship. I want you to continue to sacrifice your gifts for my glory for as long as you possibly can, because you love the concept of Hesed, because you know my Hesed for you. The Hesed that has never ended and will never end. That is what I'm about. I am capturing your heart, and I'm capturing your heart for a lifetime. And then his last statement that he says, I want you to act justly according to my desires. I want you to love Hesed. And I want you to walk humbly. That word humbly, it's a really hard word. And of all this passage, if you look at different Bibles, it's the one most different. It has this concept of just, you know, when you walk with a little child and you're not sure when they're going to wander off or when they're going to fall down or when they're going to need to use the restroom, and you just can't just head off in life and just start walking and then go, hey, where are the kids at? It's really interesting that God in his revelation says this. This is what I want for you in our covenant relationship. I want you to just do what comes from your heart because you've gotten my heart. And I want you to do it for a long time. But I don't want you to do it for me. I want you to do it with me. One of the hardest things for me, the planner, is when I put together an incredible agenda of all the great things that are going to hit every single point that I know will touch Heather's heart. And she'll be like, oh, you're the most incredible man. How could you love me so well? And she goes, I just want to lay in bed. We can't, no, you don't know what I have planned. And that's exactly what God says to each and every one of us. Do you love me enough to walk carefully with me and pay attention to what I really want in that moment? And even though I've asked that from you for the last 15 years, this is the moment I'm asking you to lay it down. Because that's not what I want for you and I at this time. Can you walk humbly with your God? Am I yours and you mine? The message of Micah, I'm not satisfied. And it's the exact opposite of what we translate when we hear God isn't satisfied with us. God's not satisfied with me. I need to do more. And that's the last thing he's asking for. He says, you've missed the point if that's where you go. I'm not satisfied because you're not enough of mine and I'm not enough of yours. I just want you. I just want you. It comes into real actions, but it's all about where the heart is. Is the covenant with your God the most important thing in your whole entire life? So how could you and I act more justly? If you were going to know God's heart, where has God revealed himself in most black and white ways? Maybe here? How many of you this week have sat down when you could have done anything else and just said, I want to know your heart. I want to see you. I want to hear you. I want to read this. I want to listen to this. I want to meditate on this. You did that when you were young and in love with the letters that your lover gave to you. Has he ceased being that? Because he says, here I am. I'm not far from you. I've made it evident to you what I require. I want your heart. I want you. For those of us who aren't word-based people, do we go out and just sit in nature and set all the other things that could be done to the side so we can just see, like Paul says, that the glory, all of his divine characteristics are revealed simply through all the stuff he's made. It's right there staring you in the face. He's like, hey, I'm beautiful. I'm persistent. I'm patient. It's all right there. Some of us are we loving Hesed? Are we complaining about Hesed? We have to keep going to church. I have to tithe. Anything that starts with have to in any relationship, how healthy is that? Not too much, right? First things first, does he have your heart? And if he has your heart, stay committed. It's going to get dry. It's going to get boring. Where are the needs inside of our community that you're sitting and watching and going, I hope somebody else takes care of that? Where are the needs within your household with that he wants you to love Hesed? He wants you to give care in a committed way and say, I have no idea where this is going to go, how this is going to turn out, but I am going to give myself to this over and over and over and over again. Because this is who God is. He's an Hesed God, and I want to be a Hesed believer. Or maybe for some of us, we don't walk with God. We don't really pay that much attention to him. We run through our day, we run through our week, and then when things really fall apart or there's something brilliant that shows up, then we're like, oh, God, you're there. Could we take every half an hour that we see the minute hand on the 30 or 30 up on your clock, that you stop for 1 minute and just say, God, I'm reminding myself I'm on this journey with you, not for you. I'm with you and you're with me. Where have I missed you trying to talk to me in this last hour? What do you want me to do in the next? I'm just reminding myself we're on this together. I don't know if you remember, if you did this. Maybe I was crazy when I was young and married. I would call my wife like 13 times during the day. What are you doing now? What are you doing now? What are you doing now? Because I couldn't fathom living life separated from her. And because we're physical beings, that literally happens. The eternal one of the universe, in him you live and move and have your being. When are you ever disconnected from him? And how often do you and I go through our days and our weeks and our months without a thought that he is in any way present and available and with us? And maybe at that moment, he's asking us to do something that we've never done before. And simply because we were careful of where he was at and what he was doing, people with big mouths shut theirs. And he speaks more profoundly than what we ever would. And people with big hands let the problem just sit there. And he brings somebody else in to find their place of service. He's shown you. He's made it evident to you and I what the good life is, what he wants from us. And he said to his people 2,000 years ago, looking at the heathens over there going, yeah, they're finally getting theirs. He says through Micah to the original hearers, and he says to us, I'm not satisfied. I'm not. Not because you're not doing enough. That may even be the issue. It's because you're not truly acting justly. Because you don't know what my desires are. You haven't spent enough time with me to know who I am and what I'm all about. You haven't committed yourself to hard, bare knuckle, just keep doing it stuff that's all about love and sacrifice. And you run through your life trying to make it all work and doing your thing, and you're not just simply walking with me, letting me slow you down when you need to slow down, or speed you up when you need to. I'm the boss. I know what needs to happen. How about you let me lead this journey and not you? I love the way that Micah ends his prophecy. In Micah chapter 7, he comes to this, and I'll read it from here. If we head down this road, God knows who you and I are. You're going to mess up by this afternoon. And Satan, the one who loves to tell us that we're messed up and tell us there's no hope, and we haven't done enough, and to twist his I'm not satisfied demand into do more instead of just simply be more. We need this revelation, this conclusion that says this. Who's a God like you? Who pardons iniquity and passes over the rebellious act of the remnant of his covenantal possession? He does not retain his anger forever because he delights in hesed. He will again have compassion on us. He will tread out our iniquities under his foot. Yes, you will cast all their sins into the depths of the sea. You will give faithfulness to Jacob. And that word faithfulness is like when you believe in somebody who doesn't believe in themselves. You have faith in, we'll get there. He has faithfulness in Jacob, the liar, the deceiver. That's literally what his name means. He has faith in you. You will give faithfulness to all of your people. Hesed to the children of Abraham, which you swore to our forefathers from the days of old. Because the Hesed of God is everlasting. God, thank you. Thank you for your revelation of your character in Micah. That you're not satisfied when we turn our relationship with you into a bunch of actions and do's and lists. It doesn't warm your heart. It's not enough. It can never be enough. Because just like any deep, loving, covenantal relationship, it's simply about relationship. It's simply about connection and love. God, I pray that your Spirit would speak to all of our hearts today. That your words through Micah would hit us. You've made it evident what you want. We actually want to go for the easier thing, to just check boxes. You want us. Father, I pray that today we would again, just like in any loving relationship, choose you. We would choose to simply just know you enough that we commit ourselves to you. And even in that commitment, love you enough to let you ruin our commitments and push us down different roads in different ways at different times. Because it's all about you. Capture our hearts again today.